This is the Grapple of Your Eye podcast, episode 17, Robert Drysdale. Hello and welcome to the Grapple of Your Eye podcast. Our guest today has been described as America's Jiu Jitsu superhero, the most accomplished American grappler of his generation, the best submission wrestler in the world, and the guy that wrote those bloody books. Could you please welcome to our show today, Mr. Robert Drysdale. Thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedule, sir.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay. I'd just like to start with just sort of a normal opening question. Where did martial arts begin for you? What caught your interest? How did you get drawn into the wicked web that we weave nowadays?
I think some things are just in our blood. I think some things we're just inclined towards since childhood. I have very few recollections of me as a child playing with anything but He-Man and G.I. Joes. I think I liked puzzles for a minute there, but that was about it. It was generally a soldier's life, a warrior's life that attracted me. I first started Hapkido when I was about 9 years old. I did about 2 years of Hapkido. It wasn't for me. And then I got into soccer for a minute. I got into rollerblading, mountain biking. I was into some other stuff, but nothing, nothing I really dug in, like
Mhm.
full force, like fully committed. Until I found jiu-jitsu. First heard of jiu-jitsu in 97. It was starting to become popular in Brazil, maybe before, maybe 96, in the mid 90s in Brazil, and people were hearing more and more about Royce Gracie, and it was clear that there was something going on regarding jiu-jitsu. And the main thing is that people were attracted to jiu-jitsu. They were scared of jiu-jitsu fighters. So as a teenager, that appealed to me, and I fell in love with jiu-jitsu, and that's all I wanted to do. I did a first class. I got my ass handed to me by a girl, and then I'm like, you know what? This is it. This is what I've been looking for. It was love at first sight, and I never looked back. So I started in 98, and I've been at it ever since.
How have you found it's changed since 98? Because, like you say, the popularity has grown and grown and grown. Um, is it something now with people, are the same sort of people coming through the door now? Is it opening up more, or is it still something that you're still seeing like younger versions of yourself coming in and wanting to get stuck into something?
It's changed a lot. It's changed a lot. It was more of a jock kind of practice, Spartan practice, if you will.
Hmm.
It drew a young male crowd. You did not have older males, very few. You had no children. You had no women. The average age was probably 23, 24. So it was a much younger crowd, teenagers, like young adults primarily. And it was a very different culture. Jiu-jitsu's changed a lot, not just technically. It's changed a lot in cultural terms. I talk a little bit about this in my second book, the one you were holding a second ago.
Hmm.
I have a new one coming out where I talk about this as well. There's been some radical changes in terms of what interpretation of what jiu-jitsu means, right? When I started training jiu-jitsu
Yeah.
and MMA were practically the same thing. It was synonym. Jiu-jitsu was a synonym to MMA or Vale-Tudo at the time. Like we
Yeah.
wanted you train jiu-jitsu to get ready to fight. And it's interesting when I talk to a younger generation now about jiu-jitsu, to them that's such a weird concept that jiu-jitsu has anything. They're so removed from it because jiu-jitsu's removed itself so far away from it. And it's been good in one ways because it drew a lot more people in. It did have to open up, and it did open up. But it's just not. I mean, it's some things were lost in the process. I was talking to a good friend of mine from Ecuador, Solusu, And he said that, well, back in the day, once in a while, we would have like gloves on and you had to punch your way in, and then someone had to take you
Yeah.
down. So you're wearing gloves, you're hitting the guy that's trying to take you down, right? To prepare you for a real life situation, teaching how to clinch when things are real. And he did that in Ecuador. And his students, like one of them wasn't liking it. Yeah, like someone's punching me and I got to take him down. And his students said, but coach, this is not jujitsu. And that's when he was like, Rob, you always thought you were so pessimistic about these things, but that's when I finally agreed with you. It was like, I think Robert has a point, because to me, that is what jujitsu is. To me, still, that is what jujitsu is. I still look at it that way. But now these guys, and you watch these submission only tournaments.
Yep. Oh, hello.
Sorry, I just my phone is ringing, so I lost you there for a
Oh,
second.
sorry.
Anyway,
That's right. Sorry, that's okay.
yeah, yeah. But you listen to these submission only tournaments, or you watch these submission rules, and like these guys are doing stuff. I don't even know what they're doing, man. I don't want to be like, I don't want to offend anyone, but they're just like sitting on the ground and like their butts are all over the place, and like no one's standing up, and no one's trying to wrestle. No one can take anyone down. No one holds position. It's like a catch wrestling match, and it's kind of
Mm.
what catch was back in the day. It was just falling for submissions any way you could. And I think a lot of people forgot what was it about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that gave it its prominence over other grappling arts. And it was the positioning on the ground. It was not the submissions. It was the positioning on the ground, right? I have a new work coming out, and I argue that the 1975 rule set was the turning point in Jiu-Jitsu history because it was that rule set that set us on the course to be able to dominate fights in MMA.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a brief moment there where that was working, but we just deviated from that path somewhere along the way. But I believe there was an evolutionary course there to be exploited, and it hasn't been to its full extent, except by the Dagestani. Like I say that too. Those guys are sort of exploring that same
Yeah.
evolutionary route that jiu-jitsu was on in the 90s, 80s, and 90s. And we went a competition route, but if you watch how those guys are grappling, that's essentially old school jiu-jitsu. It's just grappling. I mean, call it sambo if you want. I don't mind
Yeah.
what you call it, but it's efficient grappling to get to someone's back and choke them the F out. That's something that's been lost because people don't know how to do that and they don't care. That's the interesting part is they absolutely don't care either. Like to me, this is shocking, but I think eventually the fad is going to disappear because anything that's not real is a fad. I have that theory. I talk about that in the book. If it works, it will stay. If it's a fad that doesn't work in a fight, it's gonna disappear and it's gonna be replaced by something new because cool does not stay cool. What is cool today is uncool tomorrow. If you don't believe me, we try to walk around with nunchucks with a karate bandana around your head and see if anyone thinks you're cool. BJJ is cool right now. Lapel guards are cool right now, but no one thinks Napoleon Dynamite is cool. You understand? But in
Yeah.
30 years, these guys, like, they're going to be low. We're going to look back and go, yeah, we were just Napoleon Dynamite version 2.0. The only thing that stays is what works in a real fight. It's the only thing that's eternal. So I'm not wrong when I'm saying that these terms, in enough time, people will come back to, full circle to where we came from. But it's just a cycle, man. Martial arts tend to suffer from these cycles. It's interesting to watch. It's hard
So,
to stop, but interesting to watch.
so do you think it sort of as a sport it sold itself out, or do you think it's just something that as it developed, because it from that sort of 93 UFC moment, it kind of snowballed from there suddenly that everyone suddenly was either trying to train jiu-jitsu or everyone seemed to have a black belt in it already but never mentioned it before. It was one of those sort of, things that dojos appeared around the world suddenly and like everyone had been training it for
Yeah.
years and never mentioned it. And then, like I say, and there was other people just looking for it wherever they could find it and hoping that they were going to learn this new skill that was taking all these people down and choking them out and whatever. Do you think it was a victim of its own success, or do you think it was just maybe even a marketing thing that way?
I think that the one thing they could have done different is they could have framed what Brazilian Jiu Jitsu was before it blew up.
Hmm.
And they never did that. It was never done. It still hasn't been done. The closest thing to a definition is through the IBJJF sphere of influence, which, at least in terms of the rule set, they've remained true to the 1975 rule set. Is the largest organization, so it draws a lot of people naturally. So it's the closest thing to a definition, but more clearly defined. You know what's funny? I just on a side note, I just remember this. I was rereading the 1975 rule set because in August 2nd to be precise, will be completing 50 years since they launched their federation with the new rule set,
Yeah.
which is the rule set that most closely it comes close to defining jiu-jitsu, right? It's pretty much the rule set we have today. And it's interesting in that there are a number of tournaments they're promising to organize with the future federation. And in one of them, there's a clause there will be tournaments with strikes involved, but they will be held under different regulation. And I saw that, and I completely missed that the first time I read that document, right? And I'm going, holy cow. I think that our forefathers, our founding fathers, they had the wisdom to see that a competition rule was going to drift away from the reality of combat, and that a rule set with strike was necessary in order to maintain that foot in reality. And they never went through with that. It was just like an empty promise. But I think they saw the problem then, and I think we forgot about the problem until the 2000s exposed the problem once again because it got too sophisticated in a direction it's not real, And look, at least people are working out. People love jujitsu. I think that's at the end of the day is more
Yeah.
important than learning how to fight. But I just, if we know anything about people, it is that people get tired of fads, but some things never go away. I think that what is real it tends to stay, and I think that's
Rises
why I
back to the
advocate
top. Yeah.
for it's
Mm.
the stuff that's central, right? I call it the center, right? Not the
Yeah.
margins. You don't focus on the margins. Focus on you watch the UFC. That's the stuff. That's it. That's the stuff that works. It's very simple. It's the closest thing to an empirical laboratory martial arts I've ever had. It's called the UFC, MMA. And I think we need to pay more attention to what's going on in there. Us martial artists in general, we should be watching the UFC more closely, MMA more closely, not to follow the gossip and who's winning, but what are these guys actually doing to win? Because that right there tells us all we need to know about what we should be training.
Yeah. Where do you rate things like, because there are various offshoots of like sports jiu-jitsu and sports jitsu and different organizations around the world where the striking is still is seen as part of the rule set and of the element. I mean, is that just another variation again of what you were saying earlier of the rule sets with the striking, do you think? Or is that just another sort of offshoot, sort of strange cousin that lives around the corner type thing?
It's never been tried. I mean, I think they kind of have that with combat jiu-jitsu, but they operate
Yeah,
under
comment. Yeah, yeah.
it's not standing, it's only on the ground, which is an improvement already. I'll concede to that.
Mm.
But it's lacking the stand up, it's lacking the points, so teach people progression. I think a point system is important. A lot of people don't like points, but I just teach people what fight for things and teach them why those positions are important in a fight. A lot of people don't know this, but the jiu-jitsu rule set was inspired in MMA. Sure, it's not. I wouldn't say it didn't drift away from that principle, but it does. It is inspired by MMA. All you got to do is watch how points are scored. They're scored in the same
Yeah.
places where you could potentially do damage to your opponent. That's clear inspiration of MMA. But it's a tough one, man, because like I said, most people don't care about reality, don't care about learning how to fight. They just want to have fun. People get bored easily, man. I think we're a moment in jiu-jitsu where I just got this complaint yesterday from a student, like, Rob, people are bored. People want new things. I'm like, no, I'm not an iPhone, man. I'm a jiu-jitsu coach.
Yeah,
That
no,
like
I know what
people
you mean.
need something new every hour. Otherwise, they're bored. It's like they're just going through Instagram like every 10 seconds. It's got to be completely new. Otherwise, they're bored. Like people, you don't even consider that maybe the people are the problem. We're the problem. We're getting bored too easily. I don't think the problem is jujitsu. I
Uh,
don't think the problem is it's just this
it's a
idea that we have to get
societal thing
entertained
now.
every 10 seconds. Yes, it's like, dude, it's a mania. Like you're an addict. You like need a bigger dose of crack. Like every time you take a dose, you just more and more and more. And that's the way I'm looking at this now. Is that it's hard to keep people entertained. And I think it's people that need to like kind of like calm down. Like, hey, bro, that's not what we're doing. This is about education. This is about improving on you. It's going to suck, and it requires discipline and focus. And disciplines means doing things that we don't want to do. But it goes out the window in the name of a commercial project. So going back to your question,
Mm.
the commercial project has been good and bad. On one hand, it opened up for more people, right? More people have access to jiu-jitsu now than ever before, or whatever it is that we call
Mhm.
jiu-jitsu today. but I think the standards have been lowered in a lot of ways. It's not, I think that the standards were higher. I think that the intensity was higher, the average. I'm not talking about the elite level. The elite level is definitely better, but the elite
Yeah,
level is 0.001% of the community. It's not reflective of the community as a whole. I think if you look at the community as the average of the community, I think the level has definitely gone down from blue belt to purple to brown to black. Definitely less sophisticated. Let then, however, more realistic. Just because it's more sophisticated doesn't mean it's more practical. Like think engineering, any engine
yeah,
with too many parts to it is not a good engine. There's a reason why the AK-47 is the king of rifles. It's simple. And then and my approach to martial arts is the same. Like simple is better, but simple doesn't sell. You can't make money on instructionals selling simple, right? So the commercial practice had the impact of um, corrupting jujitsu in a lot of ways, and you
yeah,
get a lot of these hustlers walking in and they try to make $1 on everything. Everything has to be turned into $1, man. And like I don't know how to do that. It's not a skill I want, but at the same time, I do acknowledge this as a skill. Like, man, you guys see opportunity for money everywhere. It's just unbelievable to me, man. It's just like I like to think I'm a martial artist who owns a business. I think that with jiu-jitsu's popularity has drew a lot of business people who happen to like martial arts. And I think there's a difference. And those are the people that end up rising to the
mm,
top because they're so good at business. But they're not martial artists. They're businessmen and women. They're businessmen and women who like martial arts. But people like me who are martial artists who happen to own a business kind of we're not as visible because we're teaching martial arts. We're doing what we do. We're not marketing ourselves
yeah.
24/7 with trying to sell snake oil to people. But it works. It's unfortunate, but it works. People fall for a lot of con artists and people that don't know what they're talking about and just trying to make a quick dollar in any way possible. I mean, the internet is full of them. It's just one of the
Oh,
principles of
definitely.
jiu-jitsu was that it was real and you couldn't lie in jiu-jitsu because the maths would prove you wrong. But now with the internet, it's a new arena. Most people aren't, they spend more time on the internet than they do on the mats. So they have like one environment for a little bit of truth there. And then the majority of their experience in jiu-jitsu takes place online where like lying is the norm. It's what you do. You're a phony by heart. Like you have to be. You don't survive in that world unless you become a phony. And and that's where we're at. Like we've normalized phoniness and fake. Yeah.
Well, what values then do you think need to be in today? Thinking back to like from your training at a young age, moving through like the period you did as well, which is obviously like a key period in the history of it and how it's developed, and you were there at that time. What um what do you think needs to be instilled, and what qualities need to be in the jiu-jitsu practitioner today that maybe aren't there or have disappeared? Or I mean, you spoke just now a little bit about like the focus and the attention and things like that, but what sort of elements are maybe have been forgotten about that maybe people need to sort of pick back up again?
Uh, I'll give you an example. Like it was unthinkable to request a belt when I was a white belt. If you asked for your blue belt, your coach would probably hold you back for another year. Now it's normal. People are openly asking for belts and mad if you don't promote them. I'll give you another one. You never commented training. If you're a blue belt and you tapped a purple belt, you kept it to yourself. You didn't. You were if you said it, if you told the your blue belt friend like, "Hey man, I tapped the purple belt today," he would call you out on it. Whoa, don't talk about it. Don't treino não se comenta. They said treino não se comenta. You don't talk about training. So if you do well on the mat, you keep it to yourself. Today, people record it. They ask for footage from the security cameras so they can upload it to their Instagram so the world can see them beating someone. Like it's fucking crazy to me. Like that's people don't see a problem with that. I'm like, dude, really? Like you're so desperate for attention, you got to brag about beating your teammates. Like it was immoral. And not only that, it wasn't the coach. The thing is now it falls on the coach to discipline everyone. Whereas before your teammates would do it. If you acted that way, people would call you on it. They had a term in Portuguese that was an insult, and your teammates would call you out on it. Marqueteiro, marketer. Like you spend too much time marketing yourself, people would call you on it. Now it's the norm. Like if you walk up to a reporter and try to convince them to take a picture of you for a magazine or a newspaper, that was frowned on. Like he's like if
Yeah,
you took I was talking to Dracolino, he's even more old school than me. Dracolino's been around longer than me. He said you couldn't even take a camera to a tournament. Because I'm asking him for pictures, like, Rob, we didn't carry cameras with us. It's not because we didn't have cameras. It's because if you walked up at a tournament with a camera, people would make fun of you. What are you, a model? What are you, an artist? What are you? You're a fighter. Well, fight. Why'd you bring a camera with you? You're a fighter. That was the mentality. They were embarrassed to bring a camera with them to a tournament, right? And then it's like, oh, that's silly. You should be able to take pictures of your matches. Okay, I think you can say that. But I think it does say something about these cultural buffers that were in place to prevent unconstrained vanity, which is where
Yeah.
we're at now. Like now, like vanity is the norm. I mean, you get little kids winning a match and they open their gi and they point their baby apps and they're like gesticulating, like, and it goes to show where the community is going. And I think that is not good. Because at the end of the day, if martial arts isn't teaching you how to become more
Yeah.
well behaved, a better human being, a better citizen, a better coach, a better son, a better father, a better human, I think it's not doing its full job. And I don't think it's about money. I don't think it's about medals. I don't think it's about popularity. I think these things are nice as side effects. But I stand with Jigoro Kano on this one. I think the purpose of martial arts is mutual benefit. It's the betterment of society through the individual. But this is not even part of the conversation. If I even said this, I mean, I'm saying it now, I know someone's listening,
Yeah.
going, oh, he's moralizing. I'm like, yeah, maybe I am, but I'm not wrong. I don't think I'm wrong. I think most adults would agree with me. Even people that indulge in that sort of world, if they give it some thought, they go, you know what? You're right. It is important that we care for future generations. It is important that we care. We should care about how we teach our kids, our students, and what example we give. Not that I'm perfect, I know I'm not, but that's not the point either. The point is what I'm saying true or false? Is it valid or is it invalid? Like, what should we be teaching? Like, what's the point of what we're doing? And it can't be just self-defense because, like we argued, it's not something we don't fight anymore. Like I
Yeah.
lived in a more or less safe country. There's got to be more to martial arts, and I keep going back to Jigoro Kano, man. The more I think about this, and he was the first, and he's the founding father of martial arts
Mhm.
as we understand them today. But the more I think about it, the more I go back to him, and I think he was right. And there's been a coordinated effort by many martial artists after him to turn martial arts into a business above an educational system. And that's where my beef is. I don't mind money. I love money. Don't get me wrong. I love money like everyone else, but not at any cost. Not at any cost, and I think that sacrificing the core principles and the roots of the art for a quick dollar operation is long-term disastrous, I believe, because we know where this ends. We just become more and more corrupted. We dilute. There's nothing left of the art at the end.
Yeah. So
We
you
got to
end up
turn
with
it.
nothing left then.
We're going to end up we're going to end up being what we used to criticize, and we completely forgot where we came from. A and B, what was it about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu that made it special in the first place? That's completely gone, man. And I think it's bound to get worse because of the next generation of kids I see coming up. They look at me like I'm a dinosaur. Like, what the fuck is this old man talking about? They're completely out of touch with reality. They grow up on Instagram. That's their reality.
That's
Their
the
reality
biggest thing
is,
now. Yeah.
bro, we're in the Matrix. We're already in it, man. Like, the Matrix is a documentary. We're living in an alternate reality, and the real world is too boring. Zion is too boring. Like, send me back to the Matrix where I'm rich, I'm good looking, everyone loves me. And that's your avatar version of yourself. That's your online persona. It's not a real person, it's an imagined, created persona. But it is where people feel good about themselves, is online and bad. But it's the world. It's there. We're addicted to that artificial virtual reality. And I think jujitsu comes in, plays a role in all this to counter that. So when I see the community going in that direction, it's like, man, this is not what jujitsu is for. This is not what it can do. It can do more than this. I know it can, but we have to prioritize and we have to stick to certain things that are important and are just were descriptive of jujitsu up to a while ago. But I think the cultural shift has been horrific. It's been absolutely terrible. The techniques, great. Level of organization, great. Number of tournaments, great. Number of practitioners, great. Cash prizes, great. Sponsors, great. The cultural value, the shift that came with all these things, awful. It's terrible. There's nothing good. The more I look around, I cannot see what is advantageous about this value system that is descriptive of jiu-jitsu in 2025. I cannot think of a single thing that I go, oh, that's a great idea. Why did those guys in the 90s not do that? It's in that regard, it's gotten a lot worse.
Yeah. So where then? 'Cause obviously, you've gone from being a practitioner. Well, you still are a practitioner, but you've become a coach as well. And over the years, I mean, you can look up. There's a who's who of people that you've coached and worked with and whatever else. But where does that come into you as a coach now? I mean, obviously you've got different age groups that I imagine you coach at your place, but where does like those values, those things, how does that come into what you're doing in your own gym now,
Man,
or with who,
it's
or with
funny.
who you were with?
You
Sorry.
you see an object, from here, and then it looks this way. And then when you become a coach, you see it from over here and you go, oh, that's what my coach meant. That's why he would, because you can understand it. When you're a student, you don't get it from the coach's perspective. And then when you become a gym owner, you're getting third perspective. So then you go, oh, so that's why that gym owner had to make me pay every month. Because I used to think they were being an asshole and greedy. Like, oh, they got massive bills coming at them every month and they can barely feed themselves. That's why he was making me pay. Got it. But it's something that students don't get because they don't have that perspective.
Yeah.
And one thing coaching did for me is it made me have a lot of, I try not to say regrets because I try not to live my life with regrets. My mistakes got me here. But it made me rethink of some of the things that I used to say and believe when I was a student and wish I hadn't because they were very disrespectful and unfair with my training partners and coaches because I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. And students don't know what they're talking about. They just think they do. So when students are calling coach cult leaders because they're enforcing unity and they're trying to get you to train with your team and you're going to call a cult leader for that, I'm like, I'm sorry, purple belt, you need to shut up and apologize. You don't know what you're talking about. And when you are in my shoes, you will agree with me because every coach agrees with me. There's a lot more to this business than just a membership, customer provider
Yeah.
relationship. You become like a parent to these people, man. You're like a father figure. I give my weekends away. I work 7 days a week. I barely get it. I had my first vacation in 3.5 years. Last New Year's, I went to Brazil for 7 days. Well, 2 days flying, so really 5-day vacation.
Yeah.
And I hadn't had that in 3.5 years. And then people are like, oh, where are you? I wanted to train on Christmas morning. I'm like, shut up. You do not want to train on Christmas morning, bro. We both know you're not going to show up. Yet normally I'm there on Christmas Day. You understand? And there's two people sure they want to train Christmas, so you're there with them. Like you give so much, and then you ask this much in return, and people are like, oh, can't give it. I got to do what's best for me, coach. I'm a paying customer. I'll do whatever I want. So you gain a lot of perspective, man, and you see things different when on the other side of the fence. And I really wish that people made an effort to see it from someone else's perspective, but they were very self-centered. And again, the internet has made us worse in that regard. The social media has made us very self-centered, and I don't think it's healthy for the group. I think a group does well when we try to empathize with one another, when we bond, when we create camaraderie.
Mm.
I think even for performance purposes, if you're trying to be a champion, I think you need people around you that believe in you. I think that's huge. I've had many moments of doubt, and the people who lifted me up were my training partners, the people around me, because we had a brotherhood, brothers in arms. Like we had a camaraderie, a level of camaraderie there that made me want to win for them. Because when I didn't believe in myself, they would come in with that extra little bit of belief and compensate for that. So like if I got to win for them because they expect me to, and I'm big on these things, and it's hard to create that sort of camaraderie and brotherhood in a world that's so individualistic where everyone's me, where their idea of friendship is liking each other's pictures on Instagram. Like, oh, if I
Yeah.
like your picture and I follow you, that means we're friends. If I don't like, oh, bro, I had a 40-some-year-old man complain to me the other day, I don't like his posts. And I'm like, bro, like this is surreal to me.
That sounds
Like
like
when I
that
see a
South Park
12-year-old
with
like that,
Facebook. Yeah.
oh man, like who's got time for this, bro? Like, dude, you're monitoring who likes your pictures? Holy shit. Who follows you and who doesn't? Who's got time for this? This is unbelievable. And that's kind of where we're at, man. And as a coach, I see this and I try to teach unity. Like I praise those guys in Dagestan all the time. And if I had a time machine and I were to redo my MMA career, I would have gone to Dagestan because those guys are doing it right. They're doing it right. There's a reason why they're winning. You know why? Because they deserve to win. They're doing it right. That's how you do it. There's a way to this. There's MMA and jiu-jitsu. The reason those guys are not dominating jiu-jitsu yet, A, is because it's too young there. And B, they
Yeah,
can't fly here. They can't get a visa. But the day those guys give them like another 15, 20 years of competition and they can fly here, they're going to clean the house of the world championships and ADCC. Ain't no one going to beat those guys. And it's not because they know something we don't. It is because they have superior values.
it's
They
just that
believe in
work
the right
ethic,
things.
isn't
They
it?
got
Yeah,
it's not just the work, it's the work ethic too. You could not, there's no amount of money you can pay one of those guys to betray one of their brothers. You couldn't pay Khabib to corner against Islam. It's when they're fighting, they're a beehive. They're fighting. That's how we were in Brazil before the commercial prize. The beehive. We go
yeah.
together, we train together, we eat together, we sleep together, we bleed together, we get injured together, we lift each other up. You're never fighting alone. It's very hard to create that in MMA, and it's becoming very hard to create that in jiu-jitsu. I had a blue belt student of mine a while ago. She created her own logo, blue belt with her own logo. And I'm like, this world is fucking crazy. And you couldn't even open your mouth as a blue belt. That's wild to me. A blue belt? You're a no one. I'm sorry. I don't want to be a dick, but you're a no one. What do you mean a logo? What do you think you deserve a logo? What have you done to deserve that? You just show up yesterday. Oh, but we're all equal. No, we're not. I'm sorry. And this is part of the problem is the ethos of equality underlying this whole conversation. People who show up yesterday, who see themselves as equals to people who've been training for 30 years. You see how you devalue the art when you're doing that? Because one day you're going to be training for 30 years and some white belt's going to come along and just say, your opinion is worth nothing. There's a reason
Mhm.
why we uphold hierarchy. There's a reason why your grandma taught you to respect your elders. We don't do that anymore. We don't teach that anymore. You don't talk back to your elders. Now we do. Now we talk shit online. Fuck you, old man, whatever. But there's a
Yeah.
reason why we did these things because it kept society in order. It's like one day you're going to be them and you're going to want to be respected. you know. And I've had a white belt disagree with me the other day. I've been doing this for 27 years, man. Right? I've won IBJJF world titles. I won an ADCC world title. I've trained IBJJF world champions. I've trained ADCC world champions. I've trained UFC champions. And I had a white belt disagree with me. Oh, but I don't agree. I think this way is. That's such a fucking weird thing for me to hear, man. Like it's such, and I'm just not my ego's not hurt, but it just goes to show I don't like to argue from authority. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But I think it goes
Yeah.
to show where the mentality is and where this is going. And I think this is detrimental in so many different ways. And I again I'm going to bring it back to Jigoro Kano. He had it right. He did it right. He had the right vision. We deviated from it. I think judo is flawed in a lot of technical aspects. There's some blind spots there, in my opinion. But as far as the vision he had, I think he's spot on. And I think that martial arts and martial artists make a mistake by deviating from some of those things.
Cool. So what about then? Shifting gears slightly, you've got this respect for the past, and your obviously your history qualifications as well, which led into you sort of researching the books that you've done, and the documentary as well. That's where it started as a documentary, didn't it, and then became the books. Um, what kind of drove you in that direction originally?
With the books, the documentary,
Yeah. What made you suddenly?
uh,
Because
uh,
obviously you're practicing it, you're doing that. Was it just a love of the history of it, or was it just something you thought, actually, I want to find this out? Or
I've always, for as long as I've learned how to read, as long as I've known how to read, I've always had a book with me. I've always loved the
hmm
humanities. I used to geek out on encyclopedia. I love history. I used to love ancient civilizations. I've always had that side. My jujitsu life has always coexisted with me reading whatever I sometimes more than more reading more than other times, but always reading
yeah,
something. And I have a bachelor degree in history. That's something I was
hmm
planning on pursuing a master's and a PhD one day. It's just academia is not for me. Um, but I have an unfinished master's in history, but it's just far too bureaucratic, and I just lost interest.
Yeah.
especially because I'm not making a living from it. So it's not like, oh, I need this for a career. Like, I don't need it. It was just like a hobby,
Yeah.
really. And it became a very
Something you wanted to
boring
be.
and
Yeah.
expensive hobby. And I'm like, no, I'm not liking it. I'm not having fun and I don't need it. So I
Yeah.
abandoned it. But I love books. I love history. I love reading. I love philosophy. I love psychology. I love the humanities in general. So I think it was a combination of retirement and realizing that my body was starting to break down and I couldn't perform at the level I expected it to perform or I wanted it to perform. So I feel like, oh, I got to occupy my mind with some new challenges here. And it was around the time a student of mine asked me why I had no pictures of Helio and Carlos on the wall. And my answer was genuine. I'm like, I don't know enough about the history to place them on the wall. Because I think if you're gonna, I'm the kind of person like, if you're gonna put a patch on your gi that says 100% Jesus, you better live by the lessons of the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
Because I can't stand people that brag about it, they can't live it. You better uphold those beliefs, right? If you're gonna put a sticker American flag on your car, you better be a patriot when it's hard, not when it's convenient.
I'm the
You know,
same.
and I think
I'm
it,
like that with music. If you're going to wear the t-shirt, name me a couple of songs. You know?
exactly. You got to know. You better
Yeah.
know your shit. If you're
Yeah.
so you're gonna put a picture of Maeda, Carlton, Healy on the wall. You should have a fundamental understanding of the history, and I did it. And I my experience is that most people don't, but they feel good about themselves. I think it's more that, if anything, that I
Mm.
am honoring the history of jiu-jitsu because I have a picture on the wall. Like, no, you're not. You don't even know a thing about it. You don't even know what it is that you claim to be honoring. You should at least understand it. So that's what I
Yeah.
did, and I started reading whatever I can get my hands on, which is not a lot. There's very little historiography on jiu-jitsu. Very, as far as primary sources, you're pretty much limited to the Brazilian National Library and some other documents here and there that circulate online. But it was enough for me to see a very different picture, and I became fascinated by the picture, and I became very interested and just wanted to pursue that.
Mhm.
The reason I wanted to do a documentary is because there were already books published, and I didn't believe that. I still don't believe that I can match what Roberto Pedreira did as far as his research. He is light years ahead of me in that regard. There's an abyss between me and him in terms of competence and know-how in terms of writing history. So the documentary was my idea. I got into a legal battle. I had a number of issues. It's still in works. I just ran out of money a long time ago, and it's running on my own money now, and I'm not rich.
Mhm.
So it's slow, but it's. I gave my word, and it will happen. I have not quit on it. I just lost a lot of my personal money and time on this. It's been a bit of a nightmare. I'm never doing it again. Put it like that. But the
Yeah.
books came out of that. The first one was a story of me getting involved in documentary and me
Mm.
becoming acquainted with jiu-jitsu history. And I discovered that I love writing. And always had in the back of my mind, one day I'll write a book about jujitsu. I don't know what, but I was thinking a book about technique, methodology, coaching, something like that. And then I wrote the second book on the coattails of the first. I'm finishing another one now. I just finished the first draft. It should be out for, by August. It should be out in the market. And I love it. It's a hobby. It's where I put my free time. I don't like, I mean, I vacation if I vacation once a year, I'm good. I don't have a hobby other than reading and writing. That's all I do when I'm on my free time. My kids, when I can. So I don't watch movies. I don't watch TV. I don't, I try to spend less time on Instagram. So a lot of my free time is dedicated to reading and writing, which are things that I truly love. So that's kind of where it comes from. So it was a happy marriage between jujitsu and jujitsu history, or my love for history. And it was something very unexpected, but it went well because it turns out that there was a market for it, I guess. I made some money from the books. I wasn't expecting it, but
Mhm.
I made some decent, the books sell really well. They still sell really well on Amazon, which is surprising because I don't know how you heard of it. It's mostly word of mouth because there was no marketing done other than my social media, which is not, I don't have that many followers. And and podcasts like yours, me going on podcasts
Mm.
here and there talking about them. But for the most part, it's been word of mouth. So I'm very fortunate to have. I think I wrote the right books at the right time, even though again they can't match what Roberto Pedreira did in terms of historiography.
No, no, because there's just not that many out. Like for me, it was at a point where I was getting really into it. I was looking for something to do with the history, and there were bits and pieces out there, but there was nothing that I could find that was really good. I mean, the thing he runs out there, the I've forgotten what he's called them now. It's 3 volumes, isn't it? Is it choke? No. But the most of them are
Shocking.
in Brazil. Clock, yeah. But
Yeah.
to trying to get them in this country, you need like to sell a liver for each one. To get a physical copy is ridiculous. And then yours was just I'd found yours, or at the time it was the documentary, and I'd followed that, and then you said, "Oh, the book's coming out." I was like, "Okay, right," and I got in on that one, and then obviously followed it with the second one, and I think it's a little bit of a revival on that now because around the same time there's been a lot of the old um like catch wrestling history books have sort of started doing the rounds again for like the turn of the century stuff in the 1800s 1900s of the sort
Yeah.
of carny land of that and through, and then your
Yeah.
one come through, and it's been quite nice to be able to read it, and you've almost got like, for me, what's going on in different parts of the world at the same time, kind of thing, trying to sort of map it out. And that was one thing I was going to ask you actually about the book. Have you thought about sort of mapping it against some of the other developments, or is it just enough in BJJ itself to keep you busy?
I'm very interested in the history of catch wrestling. I just haven't seen any. I've read a few books on it, and like none of them are like. I become like kind of picky about who I read as far as,
Mm,
oh, I'm gonna cite this guy, and a lot of it is just people not citing sources and just speaking from oral tradition or experience, and I'm a little suspicious of
yeah,
that. So if I'm not seeing some primary sources, and if the author does not know how to read in that primary language, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna use it as a source. And I haven't found anything. I was very interested in the history of Muay Thai a while ago, and I couldn't find anything. Like you'd be surprised when it comes to martial arts and like good historiography. There's not a lot out there. This is why like Shock here is such a so
yeah.
unique. There's nothing like that that I know of. If someone has it, please correct me and let me know because I would like to learn more about other martial arts. But right now I'm super busy with I got this new one coming out. I have three more projects after this one. Like I have like rough drafts that so I'll be busy, writing for the
Got enough
next
to do,
three,
haven't
four
you?
years at least. Yeah, I'm if I can release one book a year for the next 3, 4 years, I'll be happy. I have a lot of material ready. There's a lot of people that I met over the years, the people that want to talk, that want to tell their story, and they can add things to the story. So there'll probably be second edition of the second editions of the two books you
Yeah,
have. So that's keeping me so busy because at the end of the day, I still run a team, I still run a gym, I'm still a father, I still have, adult responsibilities. So I don't have a lot of free time. I just like to give my free time to reading and writing because I absolutely love those two things. Honestly, bro, me a perfect life. If I could just teach a couple classes a day and the rest of the day I could just work on my books, I would call that
yeah,
a dream life. I would do that till the day I died, man. I'll be so happy. But I got to deal with BS and taxes and fucking government, whatever, power bill and all these other
yeah.
things coming at me. Like, oh, I don't want to do that. I got to do it. It's the part of being an adult that you don't like, but you can't run from.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's if I could just stick to just reading and writing and teaching a couple classes a day, that'd be a perfect life.
What, when your books came out, what surprised you the most about the reaction to them? Because there seems to be two
Uh,
two reactions, would you say?
yes, there are two reactions. There are people who read and the people who didn't read.
Yeah,
That's what it comes down to. The people who are critical are, I won't say universally, because I'm sure there's someone out there who read and didn't like it or didn't like them. But the criticisms I have received, with one exception, have been from people, two exceptions, sorry, from people who didn't read the book, overwhelmingly. This happens a lot, and I hear for the grapevine too that I'm not going to mention names. People well known as just community are like criticizing me, like, why is he doing this? Kind of like upset that they feel like I'm trying to just make money or draw attention to myself. I'm like, bro, let me tell you this: no one writes books to make money. Like anyone who's writing a book is doing it for the love of it. Like unless you're writing Harry Potter, man, no one's making big money from this. Okay, I'm sure, you have to rewrite the Bible or something. No one's gonna get rich from writing jujitsu history books. I expected to sell 500 copies in a lifetime. I think
mm,
I sold that many in the first 4 days of launching the book. But it was unexpected. So there's the people that didn't read it. They were critical. There perhaps are some people who are critical that did read it and didn't like it, but they don't voice their opinions. Maybe they're enemies in the shadows. The one thing I do notice, and I did notice this, is my doors stopped opening for me for sure. So I think that I had a
Okay.
lot more opportunity 5 years ago than I do now. It could be a reflex of the fact that I am getting older and I'm not active in the competition scene as well. They're not mutually exclusive.
Mm.
But I don't mind these things, man, because what I look at what I gained in return, Brett, dude, I met so many amazing people, like so many incredible, incredible people, people that wrote me, people that read my books and they wrote me. And it turned out we had so much in common. It was like, bro, like we're best friends and I never met you. And then people I exchange emails with on a daily basis, and they're like the friends I've been looking for my entire life. People that you didn't even know that they existed. You're like, I
Yeah.
wish I dude could hang out. Like these like seriously, my best friends are online. They're people I've never met in person. And I speak to them almost every day on the phone. And like I met a lot of interesting people. We have so much in common, and I feel fortunate because we exchange books and we exchange like if I find something I really there's a professor in biology I'm friends with in Brazil, and he'll read something that he thinks I'll like and he'll send it over to me and we'll be talking about it later, and then I'll think, oh man, this guy's gonna love this, and I'll send it over to him, just like articles or memes or little things like that, and I made so many good friends. To me, that's the
That's good
treasure
to
more
hear.
than anything. Yeah, and I have no idea how many enemies I made. But when I look at the pros, right, the positive, oh my God, you
Yeah.
can make me triple the amount of enemies and it'd still be worth it.
Well, as I say, as someone who's read both myself, and again, and a lot of the stuff that you're talking about is from things that you have researched and either interviewed or found that an initial source material from, and use that to make judgment. I'm an English teacher by day, and I know I've done my bit in academia, and it read fine to me and seemed respectful along the way using the information that you had. But if that's
Yeah,
anything to go on, but I have got a few little points, if that's all right, and just to ask you myself, really, from me reading it, and
yeah.
it's
Well, I
nothing.
tried to be a yeah, sorry.
Oh no, sorry, carry on. Yeah, sorry, carry on, sir.
Yeah, I tried to be unbiased. I was trying to be fair to all parties. It's hard not to be critical of things that are just not true. Like, oh, you're calling so and so a liar. And I'm saying, no, I'm not necessarily calling him a liar. I'm saying he's human, and all humans lie, including myself. We've all lied before, so no surprises there. But at my job as a historian, in quotation marks, I'm not a professional historian, but I play around. I call myself an amateur historian. So there we go. My job is to rectify these things to the best of my ability and not allow any form of pseudo nationalism or even love for jujitsu to trump the pursuit of the truth.
Hmm.
Right? And I say the pursuit because I know I can't touch the truth, but I also know that I should be pursuing it. I think this is a distinction a lot of people miss in these discussions because they go, you can't get to the truth. So I'm just going to align myself with my favorite political line of thinking here. And I despise that sort of thinking. I think it's so lazy and irresponsible to say I can't get to the truth, so I'm not going to pursue it. I think you should make an effort to. And I was reading a book by Stephen King the other day. It was a professor who recommended it to me because I was asking for some tips on writing because I'm trying to become a better writer. I
Mm.
actually never went to school in the United States, so when I moved here, I didn't even know how to read and write. I mean, I could read because I could speak the language, but I was never educated in the English
Yeah.
language. So imagine, what going to school here was like. So, there's a lot of things that I need to learn about the English language because I was educated in Brazil. And he recommended this book by Stephen King. It's called On Writing. It's the only Stephen King book I've ever read. And it was good. It was a good read. And he said there in this book, he says, when you're writing, you should have an ideal reader. Well, who is your ideal reader? And that ideal reader should be sitting right next to you the entire time you're writing. And I read Stephen King after I had published my two books, and it made me kind of happy because I'm like, oh man, I definitely had that already. I had that already. It was just
Mm.
like he was just telling me what like an advice I was already taken because the entire time I was writing, I had some asshole sitting right next to me. It was an asshole. It was not a nice person, And this asshole was basically saying, don't be biased, don't be biased, that's biased, that's biased, you're being political, that's your opinion. And of course, my opinion's in there, of course, because I do have opinions.
Mm.
But I try not to be unfair with anyone in the story. I was trying to be fair with the parties, regardless of surname, regardless of nationality, and I was going by merit because that's what I learned in jiu-jitsu. In jiu-jitsu, what is the ranking? The ranking goes by what you can do on the mats, right?
Mm.
That's who are you? Like you're the best guy if you can beat everyone. It's simple, right? So what did this person do? What was actually done? And then naturally, a light is shown on some people that didn't receive enough light, in my opinion. Carlson Gracie, case in point. And other people that, in my opinion, didn't do much at all that were put on a pedestal, like Maeda, for example. I'm still wondering what was it that this guy did that was so
That
game
that was
changing?
going to be that was one of my first points. What was your sort of view on where Maeda fits into the puzzle? Because by all accounts, from what you've read, and again, you know, looking into it again, it seems to be more. Would you say he's just sort of more of a figurehead who was there, but day to day probably wasn't about as much as he's been sort of made out to be?
I I I think he was important because at the end of the day, he is the main figure introducing judo to the Amazon in Brazil.
Hmm.
And he went on to have students. One of these students had another student who went on to carve a space outside of judo that was first called Gracie Jiu Jitsu, became known as Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and now is like drifted into like 50 different interpretations of whatever the hell Jiu
Yeah,
Jitsu is at this point, right? But might is important because like if this were a soccer game, let's say he gives that first, or football. You're British, I can say football.
yeah,
And then he gets the kickstart, right? He has the first touch on the ball. What do you call that in English?
yeah. The
The
kickoff,
first,
the kickoff.
the kickoff.
Yeah,
He did the kickoff, and then let's say that he did the kickoff, and the rest of the game he didn't do shit. Let's call it like that. That's the easiest way I can put it. Like I don't see him as an active founding father of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I cannot see him under that light because he did not play an active role in developing anything that we refer to as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He was a judoka. He taught judo.
hmm,
He had a student called Jacinto Ferro, who was a known athlete, who also taught judo, and he taught Carlos Gracie. Carlos Gracie wants to carve a space. He's an ambitious man. He wants to carve a space for his family outside of judo with a new hierarchy with him and his brothers on top. He did that. He had between him and Helio 30 children, 20 of them males, right? And they all were involved, heavily involved in the art of jiu-jitsu. And they preserved a version of judo that over time became more and more ground oriented, hence the importance of the
hmm.
1975 rule set. Prior to 1975, these guys were essentially pre-war judokas. They had a 50-50% ratio. And this goes from not only testimonies from people at the time, but it's also implicit in the 1954 and 67 rule sets. It was very pre-war judo-like. And eventually became something very ground-oriented. I argue, during the Carlson Gracie era. The level of involvement of Carlson Gracie in the rule set is, I don't know. I'm not saying he's responsible for it, but it was definitely during his era that what we now call Brazilian Jiu Jitsu took shape. Now,
Hmm.
I don't think Maeda played an active role in any of this. I think Carlos played a role. I think before anyone calls me anti-Gracie, I think Helio played a political role that was very important. I think the leading figure, the person who was most responsible for giving what we now call Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if we can call all these variations Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu still, is Carlson Gracie. And I don't see a way around that. Now people can put Maeda on a pedestal all they want. I fail to see how he even contrasts with Carlson in terms of effort or role played in shaping what we call Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu today. I think what Carlson did is infinitely more relevant and important, and we can actually verify it's right. It's explicit. You talk to these guys, you go to the sources, and it just screams at you. Carlson, it's something I did not see at first. To the credit, I had to read and reread Shockey to read between the lines to go, oh. And I have a little nudge by Pedrera too. I cannot give the man enough credit because he deserves it. I none of my books would have been possible without his assistance. I could not have done it without his help. And I try to say this every interview, because I get called a good historian, and I know I'm not. And I don't mind giving myself credit for what I did do, and I did do something. but I would abhor to take credit over something that someone else did. And in terms of research, the credit really is all his, and a lot of the interpretation too was his. And they're heavy reads, and most people can't get through them. And I have my own conclusions. A lot of things are my own thoughts and my own view
Yeah.
of things. Having grown up in Brazil helps me navigate the culture better than any other non-native scholar or not. The English, the language itself, I'm fluent in Portuguese. I know jiu-jitsu from a very inside, behind the scenes, right? As a competitor, as a coach, as a someone who's involved in
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu politics in one way or another. So I think I added a little elements as far as that are not in Shockey. But in terms of historiography and research, I highly recommend everyone read his books.
I really want to, but in this country, see, I'll have
You
to
should,
see
you
if
should be able to get
anyone's
them on
got a second.
Amazon.
You can get them on Amazon, you can get just, but I want the prop one. But it's about the last one they had. I think it was £86, and it was just sort of yeah.
If you try the ebook, try the ebook maybe. It's
I've been
crazy.
looking around. Oh, I mean, it's one of those things. At some point, I'll look for ages, and someone will be selling all three for like £20 on eBay at some point. And you get them really
Yeah.
quickly, and then they'll be it again for like ages. But yeah, I'll get hold of them at some point. They're on my wish list. But what was I going to say then? Oh yeah, so I mean, from saying all that, then, I mean, you've given like Carlson and Helio's political point of importance and all that there, but a lot of people would argue that you sort of dismantled the Gracie mythology, or you've set out to do that or whatever. I mean, I didn't. Again, I think this falls into what you're saying about the people that read the book and the people that didn't. But
Yeah.
for me, I think you may have straightened a few things up, but I didn't see it as an insult or anything like that. I mean, what was your sort of views when people come at you in that way?
Well, I think that people that accuse me of being anti-Gracie, first thing I would say is read my books, but I know a lot of them are
Mhm.
they're not going to read them out of pride or just they don't like to read or whatever. I'm not
Yeah,
offended. It is ignorant to accuse someone of something if you don't know the person. You've never taken the time to read the book. You're calling anti-Gracie, and there's a challenge that these people need to meet. They have to explain if I'm an anti-Gracie, why is it do I have a Gracie on the cover of my second book? In fact, I have
hmm
4 or 5 other Gracies on the cover of the first book. They're going to have to explain why I have an entire
so
chapter about how Hoist Gracie was my hero and set me on the path of the life course that I'm on till this day. And I still
mm,
get goosebumps every time I see Hoist Gracie. I don't get goosebumps when I see anyone else. The only person in this community, in the entire fight world, and I've met everyone, that gives me goosebumps every time I see him is Hoist Gracie. The guy was a hero of mine. So I just mentioned 2 Gracies that are heroes of mine, Carlson and Hoist. You will have to explain how I have made a greater effort than any member of the Gracie family to bring George Gracie to light, one of the founding fathers
mm,
of modern MMA. And there are other historians that have made an effort to bring his name to light, but no one in the family, to my knowledge, has ever made an effort to bring him up. Yet here I am trying to get this guy remembered. I had his son, who doesn't do jujitsu, by the way, wrote me privately the other day thanking me for making an effort to bring his father's memory back to life.
no,
And so people who call me anti-Gracie have a lot of homework to do. They're going to have to explain all these things. They have to explain my admiration and respect for Carlos Gracie Jr. I had probably one of the best days of my life, the day I spent with him in California. I was with him for morning and most of the afternoon. It was like a 10-hour day with him. And I was like, man, this is probably one of the best days of my life. Like I learned so much from hanging out. I have nothing but respect for the man. I don't have to agree with everything he believes in, but I have a lot of respect for him and how he does
no,
things. And I think I called in both my books the equivalent of Jigoro Kano for jiu-jitsu. Like he's the closest thing. He's a person that comes closest to giving jiu-jitsu a final definition, more than his father, in my opinion, more than Helio. And then when it comes to definition, more than Carlson, even because he actually tries the IBJJF, that you can disagree with a lot of things, but at least there's a standard there that they try to uphold. There's a standard there that they follow, and there is a clear definition of what they see jujitsu to be. Now you can disagree with it, but it's still a definition that has an architecture around it. at least in terms of rule set, perhaps not philosophy and culture
Mm.
and methodology, but at least in terms of rule set, they've been very consistent, they're very organized, and their logistics are superb, right? And this is because of these guys. So I give them a lot of credit. So when people call me anti-Gracie, it is because the world is so politicized. It is so black and white. There's no place for it. It's very simple. You see, the mind of a fanatic is like, it's interesting because you go, if you disagree with it, let's say you're a right wing, you're a conservative, you get someone who disagrees with any right wing position, they automatically presume you're a communist. Automatically. There's zero room for thought, nuance, and perhaps you're just disagreeing with them, but it doesn't mean you agree with the other side either. But the reason why, and I think journalism is to blame here, but so are we for falling into this, is by polarizing it into two. It's simple, isn't it? It's very Manichaeist, right? Like it's good and evil. We're the good guys. Evil are those other people over there. Hell are other people, right? And then once you get into this mindset, it's very simple. The world's become very, very simple. You no longer have to think. You can just say, I'm good, they're bad, problem solved. You don't have to read, and you can judge. Look how beautiful that is. I know exactly what's happened. Robert is an anti-Gracie. I don't have to read his books. I don't have to get to know Robert. I just know because I'm pro-Gracie, and Robert said something I don't agree with. Therefore, like, I mean, to call this ignorance is an understatement. Like, it's one thing to be ignorant, but it's something else to be proud of it. Like I'm not going to try to change people's minds. I just keep inviting them. Like read my books and you make a judgment. And you have a lot of homework to do in terms of explaining how I just gave you 4 graces that I put on a pedestal. You have a lot of explaining to do if you're going to call me an anti-grace. I just gave you 4. Now, do I have to worship all of them? Is that? I mean, I'm not a cheerleader, people. I am trying to be a historian. I'm trying to be a competent and honest one. I'm not a cheerleader. I refuse to be for anyone. I wouldn't be a cheerleader for my own family. We should think I'm going to be a cheerleader for someone else's family. I'm not going to. I'm sorry. I am standing by what I perceive the truth to be. Whatever that, and I'm not saying it is perfect. I'm not saying I have it. I am saying that this is my understanding and my closest approximation of what the truth is. And that's what I'm going to write. And if you don't like it, then perhaps you have a problem with it. I don't think reality has a problem with it. It's people's opinions that are highly, highly politicized. And I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there's nothing you can do really, but I don't get upset anymore. I'm just over it. But I did burn some bridges for sure. Yeah.
What about then the carried on maybe with the burning bridges bit a little bit? What about the sort of controversy apparently that your books point out that things in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu might not be Brazilian, and the sort of the arguments that people sort of saying that there's a sort of this suggestion of a cross-cultural fusion can be,
This
you're taken away from the Brazilian end of it. I mean, for me, that one was the one I laughed at the most because, again, the whole point of this podcast is, it's different branches of the grappling tree. An arm lock over in that country was the same arm lock over there. They just called it something different. There's so many ways you can
yeah,
twist, bend, and choke something.
yeah, exactly. It's human anatomy is
Yeah.
the same worldwide, and
Yeah.
children grapple. You see animals play grapple. So there's no surprises that Brazilians would reach conclusions after when the Japanese had been doing that for so
Mm.
much longer. Now there are some contributions that are uniquely Brazilian.
Mm.
The 1975 rule set, and I haven't argued this in writing yet, but I'm writing a book on that. I think it was a turning point in jiu-jitsu and grappling history. That I think that rule set is truly revolutionary in a lot of different ways. And the more you think about it, the more I believe that. The culture, the lifestyle. You go to Japan and you read my first book and you see these guys,
Mm.
showing up late and chit chatting and have that beach kind of lifestyle. Man, that's Copacabana right there, man. You have to go to Copacabana, spend a week there to get what I'm talking about. I'm like, you're in Copacabana for 1 week and you just walk around and hang out with Brazilians and you go, got it. That's when you understand Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because it's the Copacabana beach culture imported or exported to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
That was huge. That was Brazilian. That was not Japanese. And I'm in favor. When I defend judo, I'm not talking about getting rid of the jiu-jitsu lifestyle. I love that lifestyle. I am talking about some of the things that these other martial arts that judo offers in its architecture and principle and writing that we lack. Um, But it's funny. I get accused of being anti-American in the U.S. and anti-Brazilian in Brazil. Again, by the people who never read my books. It's always the same crowd. So like, I'm not offended, but I think these people should, make the effort to either read or not have an opinion.
That was the same because within that as well, people there was I can't remember who it was now, and your name's up on there, but someone was on about like it was you just done a whole revisionist thing on the whole of it, and it was like for what goal, for what purpose, what to if you no most people that revise things, and normally know it's that classic history is written by the history is written by the winners type thing, but you're just going in and analyzing. You're not something like it wasn't that your great grandfather invented it, or you just realize that through history or something.
Not only that, again, the idea that anyone would pursue this course to gain political and financial advantage is absurd. If you don't believe me, ask anyone who has published books before, and they'll tell you, like, bro, you're making like 5, 10 bucks a book. You cannot live from book sales. No one, unless you're writing Harry Potter, no one's living from
Yeah.
book sales. Okay. All right. So listen, I think people are so again they're so politicized, and we tend to project our own worldview on other people. So if I am the kind of person that sees a dollar sign in everything, I presume that the entire world sees the world the same way because that's my internal psychology. So what is Robert's ulterior motive? I gotta find one. There must be something. What's his angle? And then it doesn't, and I may have motivations that are hidden from me. I concede to that. Like I'm human. I have things about myself that I don't know, and they're not on the surface of my mind, and they're deep within my psyche, and I can't reach them yet, or maybe ever. True, maybe I have hidden motivations, but I don't think that money is one of them. Because again, you have to be an idiot to write books to make money. I mean, no one's getting rich from books. Anyone who writes books knows this. There's a chance in a million you're going to make any money from books, and it's the amount of work that goes into this. Please, please, it's an absurd claim. Like what politically, I lost more than I gained. I told you what I gained were the friendships.
Mm.
You think you're planning, I'm going to piss off half the jiu-jitsu world so I can make some friends? You don't know that. How are you going to know you're going to make friends? I knew I was going to upset some people, but I didn't care because it's not important to me. To me, truth is more important than people's feelings. I think this whole project for like tiptoeing around people's feelings is harmful. Like I don't do that. That's how I operate in my daily life. Like I'm gonna tell you what I think, and if you don't like it, we don't have to be friends. That's fine. But I want to be around people that are truthful to me. These are the people I consider to be good friends. I don't mind being called on my bullshit. I have been many times. I don't mean mind being proven wrong. I have been proven wrong many times. I do mind being around people that can be truthful with me because I expect that from my friends. So I think this is how we should be. This is better than the alternative. And I try to write my books that way. And I'm not upset that some people are upset. But again, I do recommend they read my books or abstain from an opinion.
What about the sort of like the anecdotal histories then? Because obviously you've interviewed some guys, and every martial, well, everything has a story about someone in the past, or some legend, or folk tale, or some combat his hero of some kind or other who's done this or done that, and it's been passed on and all that sort of thing. Where does it stand like? Because some people say, "Oh, you used a lot of those." Some people say you discredited a lot of those, and again, it's
I
sort
I,
of,
I
I
don't
think you've sort of
I
taken
don't
in everything when you have, from what I've seen anyway, or read.
look. I received two reviews that were public. No, one review that was public and one in private. All right, one in private was Roberto Pedreira pointed out some mistakes I made in the first book, the things that I was wrong about. Right,
Hmm.
and I appreciate it. I wasn't mad. I was like, thank you. The other one was Fabio Gurgel making a review online on his YouTube channel about my book. I replied. It's on YouTube. You guys can see it. I don't think he read the book well. I think he read the book with an idea of what the book was. I think he
Yeah,
had formed an opinion before he started turning the first page. And when you do that, right, I don't think it's ever going to be a good reading. You should really try to read every book with an open heart. I know it's hard because sometimes you look at the name of the author or what the book's about, and you're like, I already know what this is about. And you should at least try. especially if you never read that author before or you know nothing about that topic, and
Mm.
most people don't, right? Most people who read my book never met me, don't know anything about me, or don't know anything about jiu-jitsu history because I didn't know anything about jiu-jitsu history and I had read about it. I presume that people have never read anything, even less than me. So everything is new. So you should read it with an open heart. And I think that's hard for some people to do because it's easier to just have a strong opinion and say, I know, and move on to the next trend or the next song on TikTok,
Do you think it
but,
was
and I
just
think
maybe
this,
even? Oh, sorry. I was going to say, do you think it was even maybe just like the commercial implications of it? Sorry, like is it just like you say, it's that picture on the wall of that person or that person or the? Do you think it was maybe that might have just been a little bit too much for some people to sort of grasp? I, I don't know.
um,
Just it's,
I mean, I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people don't care about the history. They care about their finances. So
yeah,
if they feel that any historical revisionism is going to hurt them financially, they panic. But once people see that it's not hurting them financially, it's not gonna, they stop caring because they never cared about history. Because if they did, they'd read about it. True or false? If you care about the history of something, you read it.
mm,
Or you would read anything. I'm not suggesting you read it. Like there are other people out there. Like you would
yeah.
be interested to learn about it. But I know a lot of these people that are critical of me, and they don't know a thing about it. Like they're talking nothing, nothing, like zero, nada. Like they heard about like a conversation, they picked up a thing or two, and then they're like, oh, they want to, I don't know, act like I'm being a revisionist. You wouldn't know if I'm a revisionist because you would have to know what the official history is to begin with.
Yeah.
Like you don't even know what you don't know. Like so, you're dealing with a lot of that. And look, ignorance is something we're all guilty of at some point of our lives. It's not throughout our whole lives.
Mm.
I've been guilty of this all the time. I catch myself speaking out of my ass all the time. Right? We're humans. Well, with my case, man, I really, I go on podcasts as much as I can. I always never say no. I always like accept an invitation because I try to rectify these things. Because I'm not butthurt if I have a reputation for a hater, which I do. It doesn't upset me, but at the same time, it's like it's not fair. You know, I
Mm.
guess it does upset me a little bit. Uh, I I made an enormous effort. There are people have made a greater effort to bring the story to light than me, but I've made an effort to bring the story to light, to do justice to people I never met. And so sometimes I think I should make a small effort to do justice to myself. And I wouldn't consider that to be selfish. If I can make an enormous effort to defend the legacy of people I've never met and to whom I know I owe no allegiance to, I know I owe no allegiance to George Gracie, Carlson Gracie, or anyone else. I don't owe them anything other than the fact that I practice an art that they played a huge role in shaping, sure. But I don't know them directly. They're not my coaches, they're not my direct lineage, they're not I don't have any business with any of them. I have nothing to gain from this. So under that same light, if I'm willing to defend their legacy, I should at least make an effort to change the prospect or the perception of me being a hater and someone who's trying to do damage to jiu-jitsu when I strongly believe it's the exact opposite. I just have a very particular view of what love of art is. And love of art to me is necessarily critical. I don't like flattering. I don't think flattering is genuine. I don't think me telling you what you want to hear makes me a good person. I don't think me saying good morning makes me a good person. I don't think me smiling at you makes me a good person. A good person is tested when things are hard and you do the right thing, even though it costs you. I prefer to be around people who think that way. That's my standard of what good is, right?
Mm.
So I've always had this approach of trying to be, truthful because I think it's a better standard to uphold. And if that comes with a solid degree of tough love, so be it. I think tough love is real love, and I don't like the flattering type. I don't think it says I think it's neutral. It doesn't make you a bad person either. But I don't think it's neutral. I'm like, oh, and just like telling people what they want to hear all the time and just being nice and saying good morning. Like it's neutral. It doesn't say anything about your character, and it's the same when it comes to jiu-jitsu history, man. Just like, flattering people you've never met just to make, oh, I'm a good person, I'm going to honor jiu-jitsu history. Well, start by learning something about it. And then you can make a decision whether you want to honor it or not, but my idea of doing the right thing for jiu-jitsu, or in general, was to be critical of something I deeply appreciate. And if I were, I'm not a political activist, but if I were, I would never criticize the opposition. I would spend all my energy criticizing my own party, because that's how I believe I can help my party.
Hmm. Yeah, and then improve. That's what I'd say. This is to me from reading it. I mean, I think it's a solid, um, slice of history that you've put together through hard work research and looking at different things. And what I like about it as well is I think it's an evolving thing, as you say. I think as you do it, more things will come out of this now, like any history thing. As you dig into things, different things come out and people find other bits somewhere else, or someone might come through and go, actually, that's just reminded me of this or that. And I think, if anything, the fact that you've got so many people talking about the history and debating it now, when before everyone just sort of took what was presented, etc. I think that's a great thing to start with. So it's got me reading and rereading. So no, I think you've done a good thing, and I think it's a solid base. And if you do question it, then go off and read else and do your own research. I mean, that's what history books should do. You know, people read it and then they go, okay, I like that bit, not sure about that. I'll go and do my own research into it, or etc. And I think that's what it's done for me anyway. And no, so yeah, I think it's very good.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And again, people like you make everything, whatever hate I got, I don't even know how much, because very, very rarely is it explicit. But people like you make the trip worthwhile, the effort worthwhile. Like, you know what, man? Some people like the book. Actually, I think a lot of people. I people write me every week, at least once a week, at least. Normally 2, 3 times a week, I'll get a message. People who read my book and thanking me and appreciating and asking me to write more, and they loved it and they wanted, and So I think the general it has been generally positive, but it might be a few years before I can turn that tide and show people that I'm not a hater. I just have a critical outlook on things, because that's how I contribute
And
in
that's
my
that's what
worldview.
that's what you should have when you're doing something like that, as you say. Looking forward now, then you said you're working on another book at the moment. Is there any other goals and things that you set for yourself coming up, either as a writer, as a coach, or practitioner?
Um, I plan on finishing the documentary this year. I'm very
Hmm.
confident I can, unless bar something crazy happening or me completely running out of money, which is a possibility. Barred these things happen, I will finish this year. I have 2, 3, 4 books in a pipeline. Things I have rough drafts of 3 other books and a finished draft, first draft of this next book. So I should come out with at least one more book this year, possibly two.
But can we
Um,
ask the sort of theme of the next book, or is it still top secret?
yeah, no, it's fine. I actually designed the cover of the first one, the next one today. I don't know if you get it right or not, but that's the
Brazilian Jiu Jitsu today. Cool. Thank you very much.
what is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu today?
Today.
Discussions about the present and the future of the and the today is. I'm glad you're asking today, because I start the book with, like, I hope people get that. What do they mean by today? Because by today I'm implying that at some point it was something else, and in a different point in history it might be something else still. So
Yeah.
that's the implication of what is it, because it's changing, and that's exactly, it's meant to get the reader to provoke the reader into understanding that it's changing, and it's changing, and it's changing, and it's changing. It always has been. It's never been one thing,
Mm.
right? This is a Pedrero observation that I took it from him, and I just ran with that theme, because I couldn't agree more. It's never been consistent. But the so this book's about contemporary jiu-jitsu. Like, it has chats. I wouldn't call them interviews. They're more like a back and forth kind of chat. Articles about things like the loyalty thing I was talking about, and why these Dagestanis are taking over, and what are some of the values that are this detracting from jiu-jitsu's purpose. Um, so there's basically opinion on where jiu-jitsu is today, and I think it's going to be a valuable book in terms of people not only understand the moment, but I hope that in the future reference, people can look back, read this book, and understand what went wrong and why. So, it's the kind of thing. I know history is repetitive and we tend to repeat the same mistakes, but this book kind of comes as a warning. It kind of builds off where the second left off, and it comes as a warning. This is where we're going, guys, and this is why. It's happened before. It's happened to karate. It's happened to taekwondo. We're watching it happen to us. We just don't see ourselves as Napoleon Dynamite, but it's kind of what we're becoming, you know. But and then the other one is it was like a series of there's a lot of material. I don't have a title for it. It's probably called Rethinking Jiu-Jitsu History. It's one of a lot of material that was going to go in the first and the second edition of those books. But I got so much material. Like this is not a second edition. This is a whole new book. So I'm going to release it as a new book. And I got another one called The Triumph of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This one is like, I got a lot of it done already. I just got a lot of work editing it.
Yeah.
But it's called The Triumph of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 50 Years of a Martial Arts Revolution. It's going to be a shorter book, but it's going to talk about why the 1975 rules said it's so important. So I'm trying to finish that book this year because this year marks 50-year anniversary of what I define as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. People might disagree because I believe that rule set was so important in shaping what we call Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it's 50 years in August. So I'm rushing to try to finish it then. So that's what I have in the pipeline. But at that point, I probably stop with the jiu-jitsu theme. There's some other things. I want to write about martial arts still, but probably more towards methodology and mindset, which is something I'm interested in. Methodology and mindset, I think they're very important. There's a hyper focus on technique, especially in jiu-jitsu, but there's not a lot on methodology and mindset. And the mindset especially is very difficult because it's so abstract. But I think with methodology, I think I can write something useful for practitioners worldwide. So that's what I'm hoping on doing at some point,
Well, that's brilliant. So for anyone who is listening to this or watching this or wants to get hold of you or ask you about your books or buy books, what's the best way for them to get hold of you or contact you?
I only have one social media I'm active on. It's Instagram. My handle is at Robert Drysdale JJ. At Robert Drysdale JJ. If you write me anywhere else, I'm probably not going to respond. But if you're ever in Las Vegas, visiting Las Vegas, stop by my gym, Zenith by Robert Drysdale. I'm on Sahara in Charleston, 1246 South Rainbow Boulevard. I'm at Rainbow in Charleston. Did I say Sahara? I said, yeah, Rainbow in Charleston. And yeah, stop by the gym. We do camps here for every big tournament. I teach every day. I teach 2 classes a day. Everyone's welcome. So yeah, I'd love to meet some of the listeners in person one day. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed our chat.
Thank you very much. Well, again, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to talk to us today, sir. And I wish you all the best with your teaching and the books, and I look forward to reading them.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you, Brett. See you guys next time. Thank you.
So thank you once again, Robert Drysdale, for joining us. I've been your host, Brett Summers, and we'll be back again next week with another guest. Until then, you can keep up with everything we're doing on the grapplervri.com. We're also on social media, on Instagram and Facebook and all the others. And if you do like listening to the podcast, you can catch us on the Spotify and on the Apple podcast apps and all the other sort of podcast apps that are out there. If you do listen on there, any reviews and likes and shares, etc., and ratings are really, really good and really do help us out. So that would be really much appreciated. If you're someone who prefers to watch, then you can check us out on YouTube, where again, any subscriptions and notification enabled and thumbs up and comments and all that cool stuff really, really, really is appreciated. Until then, we'll be back next week with another guest. So stay safe and stay on the mats.